about mid-message, so you'll have to wait for it. It's built in this time. So we have two combined Torah portions today, which sometimes happens throughout the year. We have Acharei Mot, which means after the death of, another very, creative title for a Torah portion. And Kedoshim, which is holy ones. The opening chapter of Kedoshim contains two of the most powerful of all commandments. We read in Leviticus 19:33 and 34, "Love your neighbor as yourself, I am the Lord." This is the first. And the second follows, "When a stranger comes to live in your land, do not mistreat him. Treat the stranger the way you treat your native born. Love him as yourself, for you were strangers in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." The first, and I borrowed this because I saw it back there in that little corner. It's even on a ruler, the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We all know this, right? So the first of those that I mentioned is often called the golden rule and is held to be universal to all cultures and creeds and faiths and beliefs. Atheists believe in and all of these things. But to say that this, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is encompassing this first commandment would be a mistake. The golden rule is different. In its positive formulation, it states, act toward others as you would wish them to act toward you. Or its negative formulation, as Hillel said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That's kind of the reverse way of looking at it. Notice that these rules are not about love. They are about justice, or more precisely, what anthropologists or moralists call reciprocal altruism. That fancy word which we could debate for 100 million years if it actually exists. Is there such a thing, truthfully, as reciprocal altruism? People will often say, well, yeah, sure, if I go out and I see a family in need who's poor and I buy them all these groceries and clothes and give them money for their rent, and I go in the middle of the night and put it on their porch, and I don't tell them it was me, and I run away, isn't that reciprocal altruism? Isn't it actual altruism? Well, yes, but you could argue that you feel good inside when you do that, right? So are you doing something in exchange for something else? Now, we can't control those feelings of goodness that we have, so we could debate that forever. But that's what that's talking about. The Torah does not say, be nice to your neighbor because you would wish him to be nice to you. It says, love your neighbor. That is something different and far more powerful. The second commandment is more radical still. The vast preponderance of people in most societies, in most ages, have feared, hated, and often harmed the stranger in their midst. There's a word for this, xenophobia. Dislike or prejudice towards strangers, right? How many of you have heard the opposite of that word? Xenophilia. Probably none of you. We don't use it a lot. It sounds vaguely not polite, but it just means, the Greek of it just means the love of the stranger, love of the other, the love of your neighbor. So, people do not generally love strangers. We don't love what we don't understand. We don't love what's different. That is why almost always when the Torah states this command, and it does so in various ways at least 36 times, it adds this explanation every time. Because you were strangers in Egypt. For 400 years, the Jews were strangers in Egypt. That's 15 generations. I know of no other nation that was born as a nation in slavery and exile. They knew what it felt like to be vulnerable. That is why love of stranger is so central to Judaism and Christianity and so marginal to almost every other system of ethics. It's different. But here too, the Torah does not use the word justice. There is a command of justice toward the stranger, but that's a different law altogether. Exodus 22:20 says, "You shall not wrong a stranger nor oppress him." Our Torah portion today doesn't speak of justice, it speaks of love. These two commands define our faith as a religion of love. not just of God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, but of humanity also, God's children. That was, and it is, a world-changing idea. But what calls for deep reflection is where these two commands appear. They do so in this parsha, in Kedoshim, in what to contemporary eyes may seem to be one of the strangest passages in all of the Torah. Let us look at why. Leviticus 19 brings side-by-side laws that are seemingly quite different when you put them together. Some belong to the moral life. Do not gossip, do not hate, do not take revenge, do not bear a grudge. Some are about social justice. Leave parts of the harvest for the poor. Do not pervert justice. Do not withhold wages from a worker. Do not use false weights and measures. Others have a different feel altogether. Do not crossbreed livestock. Do not plant a field with mixed seeds. Do not wear a garment of mixed wool and linen. Do not eat fruit of the first 3 years. Do not consume blood. Do not practice divination. Do not lacerate yourself. At first glance, these laws have nothing to do with one another. Some are about conscience, some about politics and economics, others about purity and what is forbidden. Clearly, though, the Torah is telling us otherwise. There is a connection here. They do have something in common. They are all about order, limits, and boundaries. I spoke of limits 2 weeks ago. These laws tell us that reality has a certain underlying structure whose integrity must be honored. If you hate or take revenge, you eventually destroy relationships. If you commit injustice, you undermine the trust on which society depends. If you fail to respect the integrity of nature, you take the first step down a path that ends in a lackadaisical attitude toward God's creation. There's an order to the universe, part moral, part political, part ecological. When that order is violated, eventually there is chaos, and the child of chaos is destruction. When that order is observed and preserved, we become co-creators of the sacred harmony that integrated diversity that the Torah calls kadosh. Why then is it specifically in this chapter that the two great commands, love of the neighbor and the stranger, appear? The answer is profound and I think not necessarily very obvious. This is where love belongs in an ordered universe. Jordan Peterson, you've probably never heard of him. He is a Canadian psychologist. He wrote a book called The 12 Rules for Life. He has had the courage to be a contrarian, challenging the fashionable fallacies of the contemporary West. Particularly striking in his book is Rule 5. He says, quote, "Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them." His point is more subtle than it sounds. A significant number of parents today, he says, fail to teach and model socialization to their children. They indulge them. They do not teach them rules or uphold those rules. There are, he argues, complex reasons for this. Some of it has to do with lack of attention. Parents are busy and they don't always have the time for the demanding task of teaching their children discipline. Some of it has to do with the influential but kind of misleading idea that children are naturally good, but they are made bad by the rules of society or religion. There have been many who argue that it's your religion that turns children bad because they have to follow rules, and then they rebel. So the best way to raise happy, creative children, he contends, is to let them choose for themselves. Partly, though, he says it is because, quote, "modern parents are simply paralyzed by the fear that they will no longer be liked or even loved by their children if they chastise them for any reason. They're afraid to damage their relationship by saying no. They fear the loss of their children's love." When my children were in elementary school in Clark County School District in Las Vegas, I was sent a formal letter from the district saying that teachers are now forbidden to use the color red on any assignment that they are grading, because the color red is an angry color, and it will scar the child. So teachers were encouraged to use purple or another friendlier color. When I was growing up, my whole papers were red, so I guess that explains things. I don't know. So, yeah. It's just insane. Anyway, the result of all this, Peterson maintains, is that they leave their children dangerously unprepared for a world that will not indulge their wishes or desire for attention, a world that will be tough, demanding, and often cruel. Without rules, social skills, self-restraints, and a capacity to defer gratification, children grow up without an apprenticeship in reality. In other words, if you baby your baby, they will always be babies. And his conclusion, I think, is powerful. Quote, clear rules make for secure children and calm, rational parents. Clear principles of discipline and punishment balance mercy and justice so that social development and psychological maturity can be optimally promoted. Clear rules and proper discipleship help the child and the family and society establish, maintain, and expand order. That is all that protects us from chaos. Close quote. Unknowingly, this psychologist summed up the opening chapter of Kedoshim. Clear rules create and sustain order. That is where real love, not the sentimental, self-deceiving substitute that we often see, that's where real love belongs. Without order, love merely adds to the chaos. Misplaced love can lead to parental neglect or codependency, producing spoiled children with a sense of entitlement who are destined for an unhappy, unsuccessful, unfulfilled adult life. This was something that was very difficult to me with my children because I wanted to give them the world. And it was hard for me to draw that line and say, but what is best for them is often the most difficult thing that I can do, right? I want to give in. I want to placate them. I want to hold them. I want to keep them safe. I don't want them to ever face anything that will ever hurt them in any way. And that's really not setting them up for success in life. That sort of protection is only going to harm them in the long run. And that was hard for me. Okay, you ready for your joke? We don't have Norm here, so I can tell a lawyer joke. Well, it's not really a lawyer joke, but anyway. A young man graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University's School of Law. On the day that he finished his ceremony, he marched proudly into a prestigious law firm for his first day of employment and declared that he was there to work. One of the firm's partners sized him up and handed him a broom, telling him to start with the impressive foyer and work his way toward the reception desk. Incensed, the young man sneered and said, "Did they not tell you about me? I just graduated top of my class at Harvard." The man looked at him for a moment and then apologized. Grabbing the broom, he said, "I am so sorry. I had no idea. Here, let me show you how to sweep." Sort of sums up the youth today, I feel like. Peterson's book that I mentioned, his subtitle is An Antidote to Chaos, is not just about children. It's about the mess that the West has made and continues to make today. Today we are witnessing an emotional cost of a society without a shared moral code. People need ordering principles, without which there is chaos. We require rules, standards, and values, alone and together. We require routine. That is the essence of order. Too much order can be bad, but too little can be far worse. Life is best lived on that dividing line between them. It is there, much like the children of Israel encountered at the foot of Sinai, that we find the meaning that justifies love and its inevitable suffering. Perhaps if we lived properly, we could withstand the knowledge of our own fragility and mortality, without the sense of aggrieved victimhood that produces first resentment, then envy, and then the desire for vengeance and destruction. In this, we find the unique structure of the 19th chapter of Leviticus. Its combination of moral, political, economic, and other laws is a supreme statement of a universe of divinely created order of which we are the custodians. But the chapter is not just about order. It is about humanizing that order through love, the love of the neighbor and the stranger. Hence, the life-changing idea that we have forgotten for far too long. Love is not enough. Sorry, Beatles, all you need is love, 1967, maybe not. Relationships need rules. And that means our relationship with one another, our children, our parents, our family, our co-workers, even God. So that's all I have to say about that. Are there any thoughts, questions, complaints? Want to get a tomato and throw it at me? You can do that too. That's fine. I have a ruler to whack it away. Oh, see, now